Okay, we're going to get started. We've got both lapel mics out, so I've got to use this desk-bound one. So I think while the whole day has been meat and potatoes of what you can use, several of you have asked specifically for information and guidance on effective communication with the population that we're talking about today, people with serious mental illness and people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. So this will be the meat and potatoes of that particular topic. So I want to introduce your first two speakers, Catherine Zielinski and Tina Moreno. Catherine and Tina are both from the Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities. Kathy's been there for, what, 30 years?
No, a long time.
Yeah. and Tina for a few years? Okay. So Kathy's the manager of the speech and language pathology unit there, and Tina works with her. So they are really experts at communication with the population of people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. So I'm going to hand this over to them, and they will subsequently then introduce Dr. Testa, who will do a similar presentation on communication skills with people with serious mental illness.
Thank you, Ruth. We're delighted to be here this afternoon, especially with such a distinguished group of speakers, and we hope that we do give you some of that meat and potatoes since we've been promoted in that way. I first wanted to thank Ruth, and I wanted to also thank Megan Patton for including speech pathologists in what we feel is a very important component, communicating effectively with individuals who have disabilities, whether it be a mental health disability or, in the case, what we're going to be talking about, persons with intellectual developmental disabilities. So we've been able to present a couple of times to the judges who are part of the Mental Health and Developmental Disabilities Court in Cuyahoga County, and we've spoken to the crisis intervention police officers a few weeks ago. We did that, and we also spoke at an in-service back in December in Cuyahoga County I know we spoke to lawyers. I don't remember what kind of an in-service it was, but we've been doing this for a while, and we hope that you'll find this information important to you, because as pointed out by Dr. Stankowski this morning, and it's also on one of the websites that we go to called the ARC of Ohio, people with intellectual disabilities they're comprised about 2 to 3% of the population, in the general population, but in the population of individuals who are in prisons, it spikes up to 4 to 10%, and probably the numbers are higher for those who are in jail, but we didn't have those figures. So it's important to try to tease out what type of disability, if at all possible, that this person has, and then how can I more effectively communicate with them. So communication is complicated. You know, on the one hand, you've heard a couple of different things. You've heard that we shouldn't really presume that a person is not capable or competent just because they appear to be different, they appear to have a disability. But on the other hand, there are individuals who don't have any outward signs of a disability, but their ability to reason, their ability to process information, to communicate with you, as well as to understand what you're saying to them, can be severely impaired. So if you see a person with a physical disability, you shouldn't presume that there's an intellectual disability. That person could have cerebral palsy, and the cerebral palsy may or may not affect their ability to process language. It might just be a motor difficulty. Multiple sclerosis, acquired disabilities because the person's had some type of brain injury or stroke, may or may not result in an intellectual disability. So the person may look different, they may have affected gait, balance, speech. Their speech may be hard to understand, but they may be able to process everything that you're saying just the same as any other typical person. So just to kind of tease that out a little bit, we're going to show you, I hope, a little video that also wake you up. We have some videos that we hope will help to illustrate our points. We know it's a long day and there's lots of great information, but sometimes having a video helps too. So take a look at this video of comic Josh Blue. Why is there this red in here?
Alright, you know, people ask me if I get nervous before coming up on stage. I said, heck no, I got this many people staring at me all day. I was walking downtown, and the drunk tank stopped and picked me up. I was like, uh-oh. I was like, wait a minute here, fellas, there's a misunderstanding. I'm not drunk, I have cerebral palsy. They were like, that's a pretty big word for for a drunk ass. I was in there for 7 days. They're like, damn, buddy, what did you drink?
I have to apologize. I don't know why we have this red on the screen. I don't know if there's a way to get rid of it or not. Okay, we'll just stop for 1 second here.
Pause for 1 second.
Should we have to get, no?
Oh, no, I don't want that.
Do we have to get out of it or? It's okay. It's all right otherwise. Yay, thank you. Yay, bravo, technology, right? So as you saw, Josh is capable, but if you saw Josh perhaps, walking towards you or you didn't have a quiet enough environment, you might start to make some judgments about his abilities, but his abilities are probably far more sharper than mine, as evidenced by his humor. So let's talk a little further about that.
So, on the other hand, we might encounter an individual with no visible signs of a disability, and I think that's where we were kind of asked to address, where you might be working with somebody, talking with them, getting to know them, and you're starting to see some signs that comprehension might be more limited than you anticipated, or expressive language might be more limited than you anticipated. So they're having a hard time getting their message out, or maybe more often, they're not quite understanding you when you're communicating with them. So as we dig deeper and we get to know them a little bit better, we might see those gaps.
Do you want to introduce the video?
Sure. So we'd like you to take a look at this video and just take a look at how he's communicating, what he's trying to communicate, and then let's just talk about it for a second after.
Tell him, if you tell your husband,
Okay.
just don't tell him, you can tell him, but just don't let him tell anyone.
Okay, I'll tell him that it's between us as a married
Well,
couple.
I'm not like any other boys, but the reason why, because I'm an autistic boy. Do you know what that means?
I sort of do. But why don't you tell me what it means?
Because I'm different and special. I'm different like any other children. The reason why I'm autistic because I had different special stuff, special needs, like something like Timble Brandon. She was like autistic too, but she's the smartest,
That's right.
and she can't be touched either,
Yeah,
and she loves animals.
she does.
Well, the reason why I'm autistic because I like being an adult and also being a child. And that's why I'm autistic. I like to do what children has done before, like cartoons, comics, DVDs, action figures, drinking soda. And most important, it's hard for me. So that's why I'm setting off to the group home. The reason why I go there, because there's some other people who would try to help me. And that's why I go there, because they're the only ones who will help me. And without them, without my help, I'm useful. So that's why I act like this. That's why I'm very funny. I pretend not to be autistic, but if anyone finds out, then people are not into me anymore. That's why.
I'm into you, Dylan. I think you're great.
You really mean that?
I think you're great.
So you like being autistic? Wait, I'm just saying, do you like when people are autistic?
I like when people are who they are and don't pretend to be something else.
Yes, you're
I
right.
think that's just,
Well, after all,
that's what makes you real.
after all, I am special.
You are.
And my mom tried to protect me, but
Your mom and dad will always try to
yeah,
protect
since
you.
I'm older, I am responsible to take care of myself. I won't get hurt. I won't run away. I'll just stay who I am
Good.
and stay myself in. And I will go wherever somewhere safe, somewhere not dangerous, and somewhere nice. And that's how I said. And that's why as an adult, I'm allowed to be responsible to take care of myself. If any bad guy try to get me, I'll just run away and say, "Get away from me!" Or I'll just ran. I'll run away from him. And when I ran, then he won't get me. That's why I'm being adult. That's what being adult is all about. That's why I want to be like a real adult. And that's the one I'm trying to do.
You're doing a great job.
So that's why, Mom, I'm very responsible for myself. You want me to become an adult, and that's what I want to do. And that's why, if I'm going to be an adult, I'd rather take care of myself.
I get it.
So you can protect me as much as you want, but I can just take care of myself at the pizza restaurant.
I get it, Dylan. I love you. Okay, we'll work it out. I'll set you up with the girls, and then maybe me and Miss Jen will go sit somewhere.
Okay,
Okay? Deal?
deal.
Love you.
Thank you, Mom.
You're welcome. I love you.
After all,
I love you.
I am a grown-up. I love you. Too.
So can we talk about that just for a second? What kind of things did you guys see or hear in his message? What do you think?
You could just shout it out. Respect me. He was saying respect me. I'm sorry, convoluted language, kind of cyclical, like, yeah, circular, special, yes?
Yeah. What about
I'm
the
special,
content?
yeah.
I mean, did you find that he shared a lot, or did
Was-
he kind of share the same thing over and over again?
Yeah. It was interesting when we showed this video to the crisis intervention police officers, one person said he appeared belligerent. And I asked him why, and he said it just appeared like he just, couldn't stop himself, this talking, almost like a self-talk. So that could be misconstrued in a situation. And although it appeared like he had a good grasp of language, you could see all the disordered grammar and time, I was, am, will be kind of thing, and he, she, there's a lot that's mixed up there. So someone might interpret that as being somehow belligerent or, not in control. Did you have something?
Now,
Yes.
my son's like him, and we have a special needs employee in the office. And like the doctor said this morning, you can't talk abstract to them. Remember
Yes.
the spilled milk stuff? You
Right.
can't. They don't get it, even
Right.
the simplest abstractions. So, and I don't know if this would work, but we seem to work it, and then we're real slow. First, you have to really establish eye contact with them. Make sure you're right on the same page. And then you go slowly with them, and especially at the office when it kind of gets to be abstract in any law office. You got to break it down, makes you a really good manager, I find. The simplest of steps, and then they do a wonderful job. They love to come in, they're great employees, but you really got to think about it.
Those are a lot of great strategies. Those
Yeah.
are all in our
Break it
PowerPoint.
down.
Just break it down, progress slowly, right? Simplify. And there was another comment. Yes.
He seemed like he was desperate to put himself in a good light.
Yes. Yes.
Over and over again, he kept trying to impress the listener that he was okay and
Right.
do this thing.
I'm an adult. I
Right,
do these.
the whole deal.
Yes, yes, yeah. And then even some of the feedback there, I think it was a caregiver and his parent was in the car, mom. And when she said, I like you because you're real, like what does that even mean? Of course, he talked right over her, so he didn't hear that. But sometimes we use abstract language and don't even realize. So what does that mean that I think you're real? I don't even know what that means, but but it can be very difficult. So, okay. Did you want to take it from there?
Sure. So we just wanted to review the communication model briefly. Good communication happens when you've got mutual focus, when you've got engagement, when you've got interest. We've got the sender of the message. That person is using expressive language to communicate. And then we've got the receiver of the message. That person is obviously listening, processing, analyzing, understanding. When there's a breakdown anywhere in that cycle, that's where we have issues. And that's where our individuals with intellectual disabilities often break down in understanding what it is that we're saying or expressively in communicating what they're trying to say.
And particularly, yep, I think
No,
it's
go ahead.
particularly when there's anxiety and when they're under pressure. So, or trying to engage in a new relationship, like with their counsel. A lot of the strategies that were talked about this morning too, about having a family member or caregiver, if the person is agreeable to that, of course, going with what it is that that person is able to respond to and to present, but to have someone else there who knows them, because sometimes, like with this individual, he's a young adult, but I'm sure there's a lot there still in his processing, and even in his experience of the world, when he said, if a bad guy comes, I'm just going to ran away. That could be that he's somebody who you'd see elope down the street, out the door of some place, could go right into the street, because he has part of the script, but not all of it. So having someone there, if the individual is agreeable to that, can be very helpful.
And I think I want to add here that this morning we heard a lot about treating individuals as individuals, right? We know that there are disorders and disabilities, and individuals might share some similar characteristics in their communication. But I loved hearing over and over again that every individual is different. We're going to be providing, unfortunately, a lot of we're going to make some generalizations here in order to help give you some strategies and things to look for. But it's just going to depend on each individual that you're working with. So generally speaking, individuals with intellectual disabilities can have difficulty in expressive communication or receptive language, or expressive language or receptive language. They can have difficulty following rules. They can have difficulty understanding the consequences of their own behavior. They can have difficulty answering questions if they're too complex or just need more time to understand the questions that are presented to them. Problem solving is an issue, and just participating in that give and take of a conversation can be very, very challenging.
So when you take a look at the factors that can affect understanding, think of, even all the information that's being shared today, the messages being sent, how quickly is that information coming across? How long is the message? How complex is the message? How much complex language has been used? There are a lot of adjectives, adverbs. There's just a lot that we use in typical conversation, and we all have lots of jargon. I think that's probably one of the jokes about lawyers with jargon. Well, we get that in developmental disabilities world. Too many acronyms, too many jargon words, too much in the medical community, and all of a sudden this is coming at this person, and what you think is simplistic may in fact not be very simplistic for that person. The word order, you saw that the individual in that video had a lot of difficulty with time and space, and that will greatly impact his ability, if he were the person you were talking to understand what happened now, what happened before, what will you do differently. Those kinds of things are very difficult. And a lot of times, the individual, we're going to look at a slide in just a minute about this, is paying more attention to your tone of voice, to your body language, to your eye contact or not, and that can override everything that's being said, even if what you're saying is very important for that person to listen to. So just because the person has the hearing acuity, they are not deaf, they are not hearing impaired, that you know of, they may not be able to process, and sometimes may actually appear to be having some kind of a hearing problem, because it's more of an auditory processing problem versus the actual ability to hear a sound. So communication is so much more than words, and I think we all experience that. I know how many times I say in my somewhat sickeningly sweet voice to my young adult children something, but they know the words, what it means. However, if they didn't have that kind of understanding, they may have just thought, oh, I'm fine, because mom's saying it in that somewhat sweet tone, which is really sarcasm. But an individual with an intellectual disability may not be able to discern sarcasm. I often say that for some of the folks that we work with, if you think about the Peanuts cartoons, and always the teachers are represented as wah, 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 sometimes that's what we might sound like, because the words aren't as important. It's more how you look. It's the tone of voice. It's the loudness of your voice. So face-to-face communication, look at, words are just a very small amount of what is understood, and everything else is tone and body language. And then on the phone, so if you have to have some phone interactions, again, the individual may be paying much greater attention to your tone with them than the actual words. So as much as you can simplify, that's going to be helpful, because they're already a bit lost. is this? Okay. All right, so we wanted to talk about some common characteristics of persons, again, generalities, but people with intellectual disabilities, what you might see, and then we're going to talk about strategies. So acquiescence is very common. The person might not understand what's being said, so they want to look cool, they want to be cool, they want to show you, I am capable, the whole thing, I'm an adult. So the person may cover their misunderstanding because they don't want to appear less than anyone else. And that's a kind of masking that's on the next slide. But it can also get them into trouble even in their interactions with others. They may find it difficult to say no. It's difficult to have a peer group no matter what age we are. However, if you're a person with an intellectual disability, once you get past the school ages, which can be difficult enough, but in adulthood, how do I negotiate friendships and relationships? People with intellectual disabilities will often say yes to things, even if somewhere in there they know it should be a no. But hey, this guy was nice to me and gave me candy, and so now I'm going to do what he said, or I'm going to get an extra hug, or I might get a lot more that we're not going to go into right now, but they could find it difficult to say no. And especially if they think that person is someone who knows more than they do, an authority figure. So whether that's you as their counsel, or someone that perhaps helped to get them to that point that they're coming to see you and that they're in the court system. So they might be afraid to say no and just agree with what's being said to avoid getting into trouble. Masking is what I started talking about in the last slide. So the rote learning of statements to just kind of cover up. I've often been impressed and somewhat frustrated when I meet a person who's at that mild intellectual disability level, how savvy they are, how socially savvy. They could have like their peeps that they hang out with, they can make their way around in the world, but then when you dig a little bit deeper and start to ask a few more questions about what they understood of the situation or what their plan is, they can sometimes recite off words, just idiomatic phrases to something, you know, that's kind of like the cool jargon. The Urban Dictionary is being spit back at you, but where is the content underneath? It could be somewhat empty because these are learned behaviors. It can get the person through, it can get them somewhat of a social structure and some peers, but it can also lead to situations that are illegal or could get them into a lot of trouble. So it can help the person in a lot of ways, and sometimes that rote learning of statements can really help in a job situation. It can help you in a living situation, but when it goes too far, then it's difficult to discern just what is this person's true level of understanding.
Individuals with intellectual disabilities can have a lot of difficulty understanding directions. They may require instructions to be chunked into information like we heard just a second ago, right? Taking sections of information, separating it out, and providing the steps. Visuals can be very helpful, and we heard that earlier in terms of using writing things down. Awesome strategy. A lot of individuals aren't readers too. So a lot of times you might need to use picture representation, symbols, and if there is reading comprehension, simple texts so that they can understand that. And then they can recall it later as well because they might not be able to process it all at once. But if they're able to review it later, given time to reflect, then they've got that support as they try to recall what it is that they're learning, what they're trying to make a decision on. They might have difficulty with sequencing. So for example, if I ask somebody, before you do step 2, do step 1. Well, what did they hear first? Probably the first part, which is what they were supposed to do second. So that can be complicated. And the same thing, Kathy touched on it, that time, it can be challenging. You might be told, tomorrow I'm going somewhere, but I don't know, tomorrow could be 3 weeks from now, or yesterday I went on vacation, but that could have been 2 years from now. So that time, that concept of time can be very, very challenging. So,
and the person may use words.
Yeah.
So they may have not really understood, but they might talk about things that happened, you know, just yesterday, like you said. And then you dig deeper and it's something that happened a long time ago. So their use of temporal language is impaired.
Right, right. So if you're asking them to recall something, that might be an issue in terms of time. If you're asking them questions, you could have trouble there too because they might not understand exactly what it is that you're asking. So, All right, this is our next, got a next video for you. Let's take a look at that.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's been a signal failure. We'll be holding the trains. Doors open in a couple of minutes. Excuse me, sir. I said it'd be a couple of minutes.
What? But, not again. Oh, typical.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's been a signal failure. We'll be holding the trains. Doors open in a couple of minutes. Excuse me, sir. I said it'd be a couple of minutes.
Door, I need to get in this train.
Excuse me, sir. I said it'd be a couple of minutes.
Get on the train.
I said doors will open in a couple of minutes.
I need to get this door open. I have a valid ticket and I need to get on the train.
Stop it or you'll break it.
I need to get on this train.
I need assistance. Assistance needed, platform 3. Assistance, platform 3.
I must get on this train. I have a valid ticket. I need to get on the train.
Stand back, please, sir. Stand back. Right, sir.
Get on. I need to get on the train.
Sir. Sir, please.
No.
I need you to come with us, okay?
So here we have an individual with no apparent obvious disability who responded very, very differently when instructed, just like everybody else. So everybody else received the same instructions. Train wasn't working, it's running late. And in a panic, in a moment of incredible anxiety, worry, he couldn't comprehend those directions.
And also, I don't know that he knew it was directed at him. He was very self-directed at that point. He had a high need to keep his schedule, and this train's got to open up so I can keep my schedule. And although I just wanted to point out, too, we were able to find more videos about people with autism just because that's what's available there on YouTube. But this could be anyone with an intellectual disability who, again, has a certain sense of their own schedule, what they can control, and may not even pay attention to everything else happening around them, that those words were even meant for me. So you could see what that could lead to. Next.
Yeah,
Yep.
sure.
All right.
So individuals with intellectual disabilities might not understand the consequences of their actions. So in general, cause and effect might be challenging. But in addition to that, you have limited knowledge of the law. You might have a limited history or background, right? Your life might have been more sheltered than others. And then add to that, there's often a difficulty in the area of perspective taking. So earlier I heard something about remorse. Can an individual show remorse? Well, boy, that can be challenging if A, you weren't really understanding that your behaviors had consequences, and B, you didn't understand the law, and C, you don't have that perspective. You don't necessarily understand that you may have hurt somebody or hurt a business or had some type of negative effect on somebody else. So, and then in addition, there could be a lack of awareness of seriousness, of gravity of a situation. And that can be due to that limited background experience, that limited history that we all have in life.
Mm-hmm. So we have one more video to show you. This is a little bit more on the expressive side of how, so a person communicating something that seems really out of sync with what everybody else is communicating.
Hey, Daniel, you want to take a seat?
Don't worry about it, he was an idiot anyway.
Plenty of fish in the sea.
I understand it. Just don't understand it.
There's nothing to understand. Just playing games. Just wants you running around after him.
I mean, if there's something wrong with me.
Just count it as his loss.
But why would he say he loved me, and why would he dump me?
Because he's a man.
But why? Why has another one dumped me?
Maybe he thought you were ugly.
Okay, so, not exactly the kind of thing you might say to your coworker in the lunchroom. He could have gotten punched in the face because of that. That could have led to all kinds of things. But that literalness, that's just what he sees, so he would just say it. So again, that inability sometimes to use the social filters or understand social norms of what one would or wouldn't say, that could lead to all kinds of difficulties. And that could lead to violence, even if it's the wrong person that you've encountered, or it could also be in a situation where you're interviewing the person and they say something that seems so off, but it's because for them there's kind of a clear-cut black and white, and we're dealing in the gray. And that can be very difficult for that person to deal in the gray. So this leads a little bit to the difficulty in describing facts or details. Could be partly the person's limited vocabulary, but it could be, again, the concepts of sequence, of ordering what happened and what happened where and with whom. The short-term and long-term memory deficits have a big play into the person's ability to really express in some kind of sequential manner, or even in some kind of an organized fashion, as to what happened or what they did or what they're going to do in the future. And then the person's distractibility. I mean, I think we're all, especially in this day and age, distractible, but particularly the person with an intellectual disability may be with you and then not with you, and with you and not with you. So that's why, again, one of our recommendations, and I say sometimes even for the person who doesn't have great reading skills, sometimes even seeing a 1, 2, 3 and keeping them kind of focused on these are the 3 things. They may not be reading everything you've written down, but they're remembering there are 3 things I have to remember, 3 things I have to do. That can be helpful. So these memory deficits can affect their ability to relate information as well as retain that information and utilize it in some fashion for the future. And along with that is the difficulty in asking questions. This is something that we as speech pathologists are often asked, can you help this individual ask questions? Asking a question involves being able to take a perspective. And taking a perspective, what can I gain from this person by asking a question, much less the word order involved and which of those WH questions do I use. So the person may not be able to let you know that they don't completely understand and they don't really know. And again, remember, I'm trying to mask the ability if I'm that person with an intellectual disability. I don't want you to think badly of me or think that I haven't paid attention or that I'm not a nice person. So somewhere in this becomes kind of a big mush of what is this person really capable of handling, and what is it that I can help them with so that we can just have some a clear-cut path for how to work together. And then there's the exotic storytelling. I'm sometimes, again, it can be amusing, but it can also be very difficult to kind of cut through what is real and what isn't. It could be something the person saw on television that impacted an experience they had on the bus on the way to whatever happened or on their way to the court, and all of a sudden the story, it's the big fish story. And the person, partly it could be a way to get social acceptance. People think I'm funny, but it also could be that the person is trying to impress you and they're trying to share something with you because they want to be valued. So some of the advice we give is to not deny the story, because that can get into a whole kind of a match of who's right, who's wrong, but try to find out, why is the person telling me this story? It appears that this is really something that probably did not happen to them, and try to see what feature of that story was it they were trying to bring out. Was it that they just wanted to be acknowledged that there's somebody who can take care of themselves? Is it that they want you to know that they did try to do something differently? And maybe they just embellished it because it would just sound better that way. So again, they're very difficult to work with, and I'm sure that Dr. Tussa is going to talk about how that all kind of parallels or overlaps with people who have mental illness, and there are individuals who have the dual diagnosis, but trying to figure out what is that person telling me that, that's the kernel of truth. Try to hear the meaning behind the story.
All right, so we have some general strategies or recommendations for communicating with individuals with developmental disabilities or intellectual disabilities. Whenever possible, use simple language, use simple vocabulary, be concise, speak in short sentences, avoid idioms and figurative language like we talked about earlier that just, those are taught by families growing up through reading, and they're just too complex sometimes. Break down the information into chunks, into 1, 2, 3. Be succinct, and maybe summarize as much as possible. We recommend avoiding yes or no whenever possible, because you're probably going to get a yes more often than not, and you won't necessarily know if that was a yes to please, to be agreeable, or if indeed that was a yes. And then to give choices whenever you can as well. It'll help you narrow down things like context, and then you can go from there if need be with your questions.
If you're trying to probe a little bit, I've even said to people, to staff, to families, if you don't have any place to write something down and you want the person to choose, even if they are using language, they are talking to you, they're using speech, but sometimes saying, it's this or it's this. Sometimes that concreteness of just two hands in front of them, that's the one I meant. Because sometimes you don't have a picture there to show them, but if you can break it down so that the person sees that there is a choice, because it might have just all blurred together. It was just one big sentence, and I'm supposed to choose? I don't know what to choose. So trying to make something as concrete as possible, as visual as possible.
When there's a lot of information that you need to share, we recommend that you progress very slowly. You break down the information, you repeat messages, and you check for comprehension often. So if you want to verify something, get some facts about day one, then we suggest that you just work on that, break it up, take a break, change the scenery, take a walk, change a subject, and then maybe come back and revisit what it is that you're talking about. So comprehension should be checked for periodically, especially if the information is very complex, and before you move on to a new topic. Yeah.
I suspect that you really need to be very respectful with individuals with ID. And when you trying to get a point across to them, is it valuable to have them explain to you what you believe or what you said to them?
Yes, as much as possible. Tell me what I said. And actually...
Without being condescending.
Right. I've told you a lot of things. We've talked about a lot of things, and actually you're right on this slide. Use things like, tell me what I said. Let's make sure we're together here. Tell me what I said, and see what the person can give you back, and maybe jot that down so you can use their words too, especially if they got two of the points. Okay, yes, that's what I said, yes. Okay, that part, no, not so much. Or were they able to give you anything back? Trying that first and next, that 1 and 2. Trying to simplify it and help them simplify their response back to you. And ask very simple questions. We just put a few down that, again, we're not in your world, but what happened? What did you do? What will you do next time? Versus, did you hear what I said? Do you have some questions for me? Do you know what you did wrong? Those did wrong, right. It's kind of like yes, no. Those are very high-level concepts that can be very difficult, particularly in an emotionally charged situation like talking to your lawyer. So so as much as possible, and this is great. All of you have been giving us the answers, and I love that because it is a difficult population to work with, and as much as possible, respect that person. One of the other, this kind of gets at the next thing that you had said as well, building rapport and safety, that it's okay. I know this is hard. I know this is difficult for you. You're doing a good job, or I understand this is difficult. I appreciate everything you're doing, because that person needs to be valued. I know Kristen Henry earlier from Disability Rights Ohio talked a lot about respecting the person and the individualized treatment that the person needs, no matter what the disabling condition is. So even if the person appears to be quite diminished in capacity, they're still a person, and they have gotten this far in life. So we have to value that. And I can tell by the nature of the questions and your responses that everybody's seeing that. So the other part too that I liked about what Kristen said earlier was from the rule, I wrote this down, Rule 1.14 commentary, the presence of family or other persons does not affect attorney-client privilege when necessary to assist in representation. So I thought that was great, because we do say as much as possible, have that person who would know them better if they're willing to have that person be there. Although you're still going to value and take what that person's response is. But there may be a certain level of comfort and safety that comes about by having that person with them. So again, we can't say enough, I know that you already talked about that, providing breaks and trying to take it slowly if possible and checking for meaning. And I don't want to take too much more time because Megan's coming up next. But the person, just remember, be as concrete as possible, use visual aids when you can. The person may not have the words or the speech, but they may be able to point to that word. You may be able to put down a word that even if they haven't read it, you said it, and it's just one single word, that's it. That's what I wanted to tell you. So I think a lot of the information that you've heard today, we hope has been helpful. Yes?
How do you handle a situation, or what would some strategies be where maybe you meet somebody, you get the impression that you need to go through these types of things, use small words, go slow with them. All of a sudden you see a video of them and they're like super criminal. Like they know exactly what they're doing. But again, when you're talking to them, they go really slow, they don't seem to know what they did, but you're watching the video of them at the store or stealing or whatever, and you know it seems to be very much at odds with the way they're coming across to you upon your initial meeting or once you're kind of reviewing things, and yet they are maintaining this, I don't want to say act, but this lower level of dialogue with you when it's pretty clear that they knew what they were doing, or at least maybe they were acting out or seeking attention or something to that effect. What do you do in a situation where you suspect somebody's exaggerating these sorts of conditions?
This difficulty?
Impediments?
You know,
That's a really good
that's
question.
That's a good question. You know, I don't know the answer to that. I know that individuals can have splinter skills.
Yes.
You know, they might have spent a lot of time in a community where
those kind of
ripping
things
off
happen.
target happens all the time. It's normal, and
they could have followed by example.
Yeah.
They could have had some, they could have been with their big brother or somebody and gotten, that's that social savviness,
Yeah.
so it is difficult to discern. Is it truly that the person, the way they're responding to you when they're talking to you is really their level of comprehension, but in a social situation, a lot of times individuals who don't learn as much from the verbal world, they learn by example. We talk a lot about using video modeling with people to help them learn good social skills. Can go the other way too. Video modeling could teach you some really inappropriate behaviors. So I think also working with, if there is the court psychiatrist or some, some of the folks here can pipe in, getting a sense of that person's true abilities. And that can be really tough because, as I think we talked about today, sometimes the competency evaluation doesn't give you all that you need to know about the person.
Yeah.
As a lawyer, you can always punt. You can give it to a professional. I mean, if you're sitting there measuring that out, you might just go ahead and say, let's have someone look at it.
Let's have somebody look at that person to find out more because, something is so disconnected from what you saw versus what you heard.
Something else that I learned through our presentation that Megan shared with us and the judges is that a lot of times our individuals with intellectual disabilities, they're used as, what am I looking for?
The person to go do the hit or to do the crime kind of thing, like they're the ones to go into the store.
Yeah.
They're kind of prepped by their peers, but get in there, go do it.
Accomplices.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they're utilized and taught to do a task because their friends think, well, they're not going to get caught or they're not going to get busted because of who they are. They'll go easier on them, I guess, maybe. I don't.
Yeah,
I thought that was interesting. Did you want to?
I was going to say to his point, I think there's oftentimes when people who do antisocial behavior use street language that they're very comfortable with. And I think as practitioners, we have to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
We have to understand some of the slang and some of the verbal usages that they utilize to get across what they're doing. And I'm not saying that we try to talk like that, but somehow go slower and make them explain some things is a help. And I found that to be helpful in my own instance. And then sometimes, as a result of that, you find out that you really do need extra professional help to deal with it.
Yes, definitely.
And also, even just observing them, I remember having a client that we were having meetings, and I found out this woman couldn't read the menu. And a light went off, and I said, she might be intellectually disabled.
Mm-hmm.
I got a psychologist, and yes, she was.
Good.
But she may have masked that very well until you got in that situation. That's a really good point. Yes, yeah.
What is she doing? Why is she pointing at the menu rather than just saying what is there?
Yeah. And another thing to point out, reach out to your local county board of developmental disabilities. I know we're pretty huge in Cuyahoga County, but there are 88 counties and they all have a local board of DD. And with permission, that person could be known already to their local board of DD, or they may have gotten disconnected because there are eligibility requirements at age 6 and at age 16, and some people just disappear out of the system after high school. But that could be another resource to you as well. I think there was another question. Yes?
So I'm wondering if you have a suggestion for kind of when you're on that fine line of having the client break things down and repeat back to you in their own words so that you can be sure they understand without asking just that yes or no. Especially when they've been system involved, they're not used to that and they're used to, do you understand? And the yes or no question. So they kind of go on the offense of like, well, I'm not stupid, you know, I'm already doing that. I guess I just wonder, like, how do you engage with those questions without being insulting?
Right, that goes back to the respect question from before, and I think you have to just, one thing that I've done sometimes when I'm just trying to assess somebody's level of comprehension, I need to write this down for me. So I'm going to write this down. Let's look at this together. I want to make sure I'm getting the right stuff down. Like, hey, what are you doing? You're like, this will help me. I got a lot of things on my mind today. Like, kind of take some of the onus off of the person. And again, you're going to have some people who are just going to come right back at you like, I don't need that. But it's another strategy to try, because I think yes and no often doesn't get us very far and doesn't really develop the strategies that they have some hand in creating with you. So trying to, again, give that person their due, give that person their respect, but then trying to introduce a strategy that more for them, but put it on yourself. That'd be one thing. Tina, you have another idea?
No, I think maybe sometimes if you say, I need to hear it in your words so I can document that versus being the one to pose the questions. I think exactly what you said, that's what I would recommend.
Another one that puts it back on you, since I'm a lot older than my criminal defendants currently, I don't understand the current, jargon or whatever the word you want to throw in there, and then you can get them, because some of the stuff they talk now, I don't get. I really don't.
Well, we don't want to take up any more time from Dr. Megan Testa, who's going to come up here next. We have our contact information if you ever have any questions, and we did put in your packet just to let you know 2 things just for your own reference. The Bill of Rights for persons with developmental disabilities, I think this gets a lot at respect, and the Communication Bill of Rights for people who have severe disabilities. So, Dr. Testa, since it's getting late, I'll let you introduce yourself. I think I'll take it from there.
Do you want to use this?
All right, can everyone hear me? Is that in a great place? All right. My name's Megan Testa. I'm a psychiatrist. I maintain board certification in adult psychiatry and forensic psychiatry. And what I do is I treat people on parole, probation, pretrial, various types of criminal court involvement. I treat them in the community at Community Mental Health Agency. So what I was asked to talk with everyone about was communicating with clients who have been found competent to stand trial, but they still have some communication difficulties. So what I'm going to focus on is clients with personality disorders. If you have a client with severe mental illness, if they're I guess I'll put it this way, if they're not stable, if they have the severe mental illness and they're not stable, they will have their communication and their speech impaired. That person is very likely to be found incompetent to stand trial. And it's a different type of a communication difficulties. If you have a client with a personality disorder, however, you may very well find that the person's really hard to communicate with, and you might seem to think that they are incompetent or they might be mentally ill, but they are often found competent. So we're going to get a little into the differences there, and I'm going to give you guys some techniques on how to communicate with people in the various clusters of personality disorders that might be helpful to you. So I have a few learning objectives up here. First of all, I'm going to go over some key differences between personality disorders and mental illness, just so you guys have a feel of that. I hope that by the time we're done, you can all recognize maladaptive personality traits, and a lot of that is going to be in your engagement with the person and your communication with the person. And then I hope to give you all some techniques for communicating with your clients who have personality disorders. So I'm going to give you guys a case example, okay? This is a gentleman. Get my case out. This is a 45-year-old male, okay? He comes to you and you're going to be his public defender. He has a very minimal legal history, and he was arrested for a fight that occurred while he was intoxicated. The story is that he was out, he was drinking, he thought someone called him gay, and he ended up getting in a fight. So he was arrested for disorderly conduct and assault. He was let out on a bond, and he came to court, and these were some just very light misdemeanor charges. You were thinking it was going to be easy, he would just be able to resolve these charges, but as you're talking with him, you're having a lot of difficulty working with him. So you give him some information about his case, you find that he cannot make even simple case-related decisions. He hems and haws back and forth. He wants to call his parents every time you guys are discussing like what he might want to do with his case. He wants to call his parents and get them to weigh in. At one point he wants to know if he can come back and bring his parents with him. He asks over and over, like, what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to me? You give him the information, he's still saying what's going to happen to him. He wants to spend hours in your office talking to you, but accomplishing very little, so never coming to any conclusions about what he wants to do. You refer this man for a competency evaluation. You are certain there's something psychiatric going on and that he is going to get some treatment. So when he goes to the court evaluator, that person is unable to make a determination if he is competent or not, and he goes to the state hospital for a 20-day evaluation. After 20 days, he comes out. He's much the same in his communication style, and your report will say something along these lines that the defendant can assist counsel if he should choose to do so, and that he has a personality disorder and not a mental illness. Okay? So this is a case, and I kind of wanted to just go over why that person would be competent, even though they had so much difficulty communicating, and why this would not be a mental illness. Okay, so definition of a personality disorder. What the basic definition for a personality disorder is: an enduring pattern of inner experience and behavior that deviates markedly from the expectations of the individual's culture, is inflexible and pervasive across a broad range of personal and social situations, is stable and long-lasting, and not the consequence of mental disorder, medical illness, or substance abuse. So what personality disorders are is they're disorders that are developed by the time a person reaches adulthood, and it affects their cognition, so the way they think about things. It affects their emotions, their interpersonal functioning, and their impulse control. As I said, many times a person having a personality disorder will not necessarily affect them being found competent to stand trial or incompetent to stand trial. Many evaluators, the statute says a present mental condition. Many evaluators will just simply state that a personality disorder is not a present mental condition. Some evaluators will concede that it's a present mental condition to them, but that they feel the person could assist if they should choose to do so, that he or she could choose to communicate in a different way. Okay? If you have a client that has a personality disorder, there is a likelihood that they might have a co-occurring mental illness. And sometimes that's the case. But what happens is individuals will go for their evaluation, and the evaluator will have to sort of figure out what part of the difficulty is the mental illness and what part is the personality disorder. okay? We'll often do this, like let's say that it was this gentleman who came in the hospital for a 20-day evaluation. This was a patient of mine. What we did is we observed him. We treated any other psychiatric and medical illnesses that he had. So he had had alcohol use disorder. We made sure he was clean and sober. He was there for 20 days. He had like a mild anxiety disorder, and we made sure he was on medications for his anxiety disorder. And then we observed him. And anything sort of that was left, we realized was due to a personality disorder. And how you decide if they can control it or not, or if they could choose a different way or not, is that we watch their behavior on the unit. So with this gentleman, you know, at first, he couldn't even decide like what to order on his menu. He would come to the office multiple times, wanting to discuss things that we already discussed in team. He couldn't really make any decisions about medications, if he would consent or not. He wanted to call his parents all the time. At one point in time, his 80-year-old parents drove like 45 minutes to the state hospital to bring this 45-year-old man gummy bears because he wanted gummy bears. So we determined over the period of the evaluation that what he had was a dependent personality disorder, which is what we'll get into later when we go through the clusters. And he sat down in one-on-one sessions with the psychologist, and he really, really worked with him. By the end of the 20 days, the psychologist determined that he could assist if he chose to, just based on the interactions he had with them. He was able to talk to him in certain ways that he could interact and make those legal decisions. So we're going to get into the clusters of personality disorders, and I hope that this will become a little more easy to understand. So personality disorders, they're grouped in clusters. So we have cluster A. Cluster A is personality disorders that are odd or eccentric. Cluster B are personality disorders which are dramatic, emotional, or erratic. And cluster C are personality disorders in which people are anxious or fearful. When you're working with people with personality disorders, maladaptive interactions are to be expected. So you should just know, if you know because it's in the report, you know that person has a personality disorder, just expect that there's going to be some maladaptive interactions that you're going to have to work through with that client. There are certain communication styles that can be effective in interactions with the clients, and they sort of go by clusters, which is why we're going to break it down this way. Okay, we are going to start with cluster A personality disorders. So these are the odd or eccentric personality disorders, and the first one is a paranoid personality disorder. People with paranoid personality disorders, what they have is they have a pervasive pattern of mistrust and suspiciousness in a variety of contexts. So to them, everyone is against them, everyone is a suspect to them for wanting to do them wrong, and they hold grudges forever. Schizoid personality disorder is the second type of a cluster A personality disorder. So people with a schizoid personality disorder, they have detachment from relationships and a restricted emotional expression across a variety of contexts. They're solitary and they're really indifferent to praise or criticisms from others. They really just don't care. It has no effect on them whatsoever. And the third cluster A personality disorders is a schizotypal personality disorder. This is thought to be on the spectrum with schizophrenia, but not rising to the level of schizophrenia. And what people have is they have social deficits, so they don't interact the way other people would. They're seen as odd, peculiar. They have eccentric ideas and behavior. So when you hear this, a lot of people will wonder, why are these things not schizophrenia? Why is this not schizophrenia? And I think Dr. Stankowski went over a little bit when she was talking earlier about thought disorder. So I'm going to just give you the difference between these and schizophrenia. So with schizophrenia, what you need to have is you need to have at least two symptoms: delusions, which are fixed false beliefs; hallucinations, which is seeing things and hearing things that aren't there; or a disorganized speech and behavior. When we're talking about disorganized speech that rises to the level of schizophrenia, this is like this person goes from idea to idea and it makes no sense. You can't understand the connections between the ideas, and it can get so severe that psychiatrists will call it a word salad because we don't know what it means. Words are just flying everywhere and we can't follow it at all. So that's the type of a disorganized speech that you would see with schizophrenia. So you would have to see two of those symptoms over periods of time with significant functional decline to have schizophrenia. These personality disorders while it's really weird and it's really odd, it's very eccentric and it's not normal, they don't rise to the level of schizophrenia, okay? So you might see someone who has these weird ideas and you're really thinking that they might be schizophrenic, and they come back from their competency evaluation and they're found competent and they're not schizophrenic. But you're still going to have to interact with them in a little bit different way than you would have to interact with someone who did not have a personality disorder. So people with cluster A personality disorders, no matter what type, they're uncomfortable in interpersonal situations. It is not their forte, they don't enjoy it, and they're really uncomfortable in those situations. They're emotionally distant and they're very difficult to engage. In their personal life, they're isolative, and that's how they prefer it. So they're really out of their element when they have to be in the courtroom or be with you or be trying to work with other people. When you are working with your cluster A personality disorder clients, your typical engagement strategies will likely fail with those clients. So, first of all, they might really not be able to trust you any more than to a superficial level just to dispose of their case. So if you're trying to really get them to trust you and you're trying to get to know them and develop that rapport, it's really not going to work with them. Anything warm and fuzzy, touchy-feely is not going to work with them, because remember, they really don't care what you think of them, and they don't thrive on that social interaction. So that's just not going to work. The best way to work with individuals with this type of a personality disorders is to adopt just a very professional stance. Just be business with them, okay? Provide very clear explanations to them. So just the facts. That's all you need to tell to them, is just the facts, with no real appeal to their emotions, because it's not going to work for them. Avoid direct challenge to any paranoid or suspicious ideas that they have. If this idea rises to a level where it's interfering with their ability to resolve their charges, they will likely have already been found incompetent to stand trial. So what they're going to come to you with is likely some kind of odd beliefs, some weird ideas. They might be suspicious, but if all you do is just don't challenge it, I would just ignore it and just keep going with resolving the case. And when tolerating odd beliefs is also important. And when I say tolerate, I don't mean that you feed into it or that you dwell on it or listen to it a lot or reinforce it, but just kind of try to pay no mind to it and focus on the task at hand of getting them to plead through their charges or get through whatever legal issue they need to get through. Okay? All right. That's a cluster A personality disorder. I can give you guys just a little example so that you have a person to think about with this. I had a client at the state hospital. What he was in for was a telecommunications harassment, and he had just a very long history of believing that customer service agencies were not giving him the proper customer service, and that he deserved better customer service. He would call and cuss them out. He would just not let it go. He would demand various things from them, and he ended up with a telecommunications harassment charge on that. He also, when we brought him into the state hospital, has just ideas about how society is against him and he never gets ahead. Just says, I really don't want relationships, never married, never had any children. He was fine with that. He said, I just want my dog. All I trust is my dog. He also had a bipolar disorder. We stabilized that, and all the personality stuff remained. He had what was a paranoid personality disorder, but he was able to work through the restoration process, and he was able to go back and work with his attorney and settle his telecommunications charges. What they did is they were very matter of fact with him. They didn't argue with him about any of the beliefs he had. They just focused on his charges, and he got through. Okay. Cluster B personality disorders is what we'll do next. These can be very difficult. So this is your dramatic, emotional, erratic cluster of personality disorders. So what we have is 4 personality disorders. We have the antisocial personality disorder, which has been talked about already today. I'm sure you guys see it a lot. What it is it manifests as a disregard for the rights of others, recurrent law breaking, and lack of remorse or empathy for others. Borderline personality disorder is also in cluster B. What this is a pervasive instability of self-image with unstable emotions, unstable relationships, and pervasive impulsivity. Histrionic personality disorder, people with that disorder have an excessive emotionality and they are always attention seeking. They always have to be the center of attention and very dramatic. Narcissistic personality disorder, individuals with that have this grandiose sense of their importance and them being special. They have this very aloof demeanor, difficult to interact with, and they have a lot of need for admiration. So they think they're smarter and better than everyone and just need a lot of attention for that. When people hear about these, they can often think that what they're dealing with might be a bipolar disorder. So especially if you're looking at someone with a borderline personality disorder, people will say, why isn't this bipolar? This person's all over the place. They're yelling at me one minute, they're calm the next minute, they're flipping out. Why isn't it bipolar? It's just a totally different disorder. With bipolar disorder, what we'll see is we will see periods of mania where their mood will be elated. They'll be talking nonstop, but they can't stop. So what they have is called a pressured speech. They'll just be talking and talking. You can't interrupt them. It's idea to idea, and there's nothing they can do about it. It's due to racing thoughts that they have going on in their brain, and it just keeps coming. What you'll also see with bipolar is people don't need to sleep when they're manic. They have high energy. They'll go in the state hospital. They'll be in there for days, no sleep whatsoever, tearing up the unit. We're medicating them, and they're still going. So that is mania, and it lasts for days to weeks, okay? And then people with bipolar disorder have depression for like weeks to months, a major depressive episode. So that's a true bipolar disorder, it's mania interspersed with depression. People with these personality disorders will describe like, oh, I was manic last night, and then I was depressed. I had mania for an hour, and then I was depressed for a day, or I had 2 days of mania. None of that is bipolar disorder, but it can look that way if you're not familiar with the difference, okay? People with a cluster B personality disorder, you can very well think when they're speaking that maybe they are manic or maybe they're having pressured speech, but if you really take a look at it, what you'll see with them is they just want to talk about what they want to talk about. They think their issues are important. They think you need to sit there and listen to it. They don't like to be interrupted, but you can do it. It's not like a manic person where they just keep going and they're really oblivious that you're interrupting them. They'll acknowledge that you're interrupting them and they'll keep on going anyways. They tend to be very overly inclusive of details, but organized. So with a manic person, they're from A to Z and you don't even know what happened or how they got there. With a person with a cluster B, they're going from A very slowly to B, very slowly to C because they feel their issues are so important. You need to hear an overly detailed account of everything they want to tell you about. So it's a different type of speech if you can start picking up on it. Yes?
You know, some of these, or it seems like a lot of these personality disorders are kind of right beneath, or right on the borderline of the things get worse. People end up with something that, some medication might be able to, is indicated for. So is that, could that be a line that maybe would be drawn where if it's something that where there's a medication that's indicated to treat this certain condition, it's not a personality disorder?
So the question is, sometimes he's seen individuals who maybe they have the personality disorder, and when things get worse, they end up on meds. The answer is, most people with a personality disorder will also have either a second personality disorder or a mental illness. So it could be that that person would be on meds. Maybe they have borderline personality disorder and they do have a bipolar disorder also, or they have major depression. So they might be on medicines for the other condition. But there's also, the textbook will tell you that these do not respond to meds and that they need to go to therapy and things like that. But in practice, if one of my patients is suffering and they're violent, they're constantly getting into fights, they're constantly getting kicked out of their housing, they can't control their mood because it's so dysregulated, even if I'm thinking this looks like all it is a borderline personality disorder, we can treat clusters of symptoms with medications that might help them. So I might treat a person with a mood stabilizer because it helps them and they do get better from that. Yeah, go ahead. This would be what would be called off-label use. So no, it's not indicated, but there are studies out there, so there's some literature to guide us that it does work in certain conditions, but it's what's called off-label use, and we would have to do informed consent that that was what it was. Okay? Okay. People with cluster B personality disorders, they will be among your most challenging because they can look sick, like that you think this cannot just be a personality disorder, or this person couldn't possibly assist, even if they chose, they couldn't do it. They will push your professional boundaries. So individuals with a histrionic personality disorder, for example, they can be very seductive, they can be very inappropriate. People with antisocial personality disorder can be very, very charming. So they will push your boundaries and they will exploit or manipulate any kind of thing they see that they can. So you have to be very careful. They'll be interpersonally inappropriate. They are attention-seeking, demanding, manipulative, and emotionally unstable. They will seek to be the center of attention or be really grandiose and aloof to where you can't connect that way. And they're self-focused with a lack of empathy because it's all about them. They don't really see what's about other people. Yes?
What age are you seeing these personality disorders being diagnosed? Because like somebody said before, I mean, there's so much going on with kids, even teenagers.
Correct. You're not really supposed to diagnose until like at least 18. I only see adults. I don't see children. But I do see some like 18-year-olds will come and they'll already be diagnosed, which isn't really how you're supposed to do it. But you're supposed to wait until, you know, they're through that adolescent period, because you're right, like some of that sounds like just normal adolescent thing to go through. With the cluster B personality disorders, your typical engagement strategies, once again, will likely fail because remember that you stand to be manipulated or exploited, so you have to be careful about the things you would do to just, that would be appropriate with another person to just build that rapport. The person with the cluster B might see it as you coming onto them, or you wanting to be their friend, or they might take it the wrong way. What you need to do is communicate very clearly, and you need to do it in a non-punitive manner, especially with the antisocial personality. If you get preachy or punitive, it just is going to shut things down and you won't really be able to talk with the person. Emphasize facts and objective issues and just leave it at that. They will try to get you to go into other areas, but you just leave it at that. Set limits and just be very tactful with them if there's any negotiation that needs to be done, because if you give them an inch, you will be going towards the mile, and you just don't want to do that. Validate their concerns, but without going down the rabbit hole with that is very helpful. And then one thing I just want to say is that just expect outbursts, especially with borderline and histrionic personality disorder also. Expect it and just try to just ignore it and let it go and just keep it moving, because it will happen. If you're with a narcissistic personality disorder and you can channel that person's strengths, that can be really helpful. If there's something they say that is helpful and is correct, if you just say you're right and just be very specific that on that point they're right, and use that when you can, that can be really helpful, because then they know that you've heard them about how smart they are, and they can really respond well to that. Okay. I will say about cluster B personality disorders, I work with people in the community that have legal issues. I have seen some of my patients with cluster B personality disorder go to the bathroom in court when they didn't like the outcome that was coming and overdose. I've seen my patients have thrown themselves on the floor in court and just had it just completely throwing on the floor, hysterics, kicking, screaming. I've heard of all kind of things that they did, even the ones that were clearly found competent with a good evaluation, and certainly I think they could have done better at the time, but they just didn't for whatever reason. So things will happen. Cluster C personality disorders, these are the anxious or fearful type of personality disorders. So what we have is we have avoidant personality disorder. What that is individuals they're socially inhibited, hypersensitive to any criticism, and they have a feeling of inadequacy. Dependent personality disorder is like that gentleman that I talked about in the beginning. They're very submissive with this need to be taken care of, and they're very fearful of separation. Individuals with obsessive compulsive personality disorder, what they have is a preoccupation with orderliness, perfection, and control, and that rules their personality. Often with these, people wonder, like, why isn't this an anxiety disorder? Like, why is this a personality disorder and not anxiety, generalized anxiety or social anxiety? The difference is that with these, it's pervasive. No matter if they had an anxiety disorder and you treated them, they still come back to a baseline that has these characteristics. So individuals will be anxious. They're really needy and clingy and needing to be taken care of all the time. They often have low self-esteem and a fear of rejection or a loss of control. So when you are working with them, again, your typical engagement strategies are likely to fail. If you're a person who likes to maybe crack a joke to break the ice and sort of start getting a relationship going with the person, just don't do it. Because they're going to think it's about them. They'll think for days about the joke, and they'll think it's negative towards them. So just don't try anything like that. You will need to provide reassurance to people, but it just should be just basic reassurance and just keep it moving, because they'll want it over and over again, and they'll want you to keep reassuring them over and over again. Try not to overemphasize uncertainty. So if it's a case, rather than saying, well, it could go this way or it could go this way, it depends on the judge, it depends on, everybody's different, I've seen it go different ways for different clients, I wouldn't do any of that with a person with a cluster C, because they're just going to spin it out of control and it's going to be too much for them. I would just try to not overemphasize any of that. If there is some certainty that they need to be aware of, certainly just I would mention it in a factual way, but not to overemphasize it. That's what they're going to keep asking about too, like, well, have you ever seen a client who got the death penalty for this DUI? They're going to want to stir up all these uncertain ideas, and I would just shut it down and just keep it moving. One thing that's really helpful is when I have clients with this, what I'll see them do is they just call all the time. They call all the time, and when they don't get a call back, they really freak out. So what's really helpful to do is to schedule regular check-ins, because while most clients might be fine with, hey, when things start to come close to happening, we'll see each other, these people, it might save you time, in fact, to just say, I'm going to check in with you on a bi-weekly or weekly or every other week basis, so they know what to expect. And set limits on your availability as well, because that's where the regular check-in is helpful. If you say, this is our check-in, it's going to be 15 minutes by phone every certain amount of time, and then that's it. We got to talk then, and that's it. That's very helpful, because if you open a door at all for availability, they're going to be calling and calling and calling. It's not likely to be productive either. Yeah?
Invariably, the number one and by far the most popular question from every client across the board in criminal cases, what is going to happen to me at the end of my case? Every client wants to know. That's usually the first question that everyone wants to know, is what's going to happen. So what are, when you say shut it down, you can give them the statutory range of the penalties, then you can give them your experience on your courts, what may happen in your case, but you're going to want to know.
I know.
How do you shut that down?
I know. So I would want to know too, right? But I might ask you, and you would tell me like, okay, this is the statutory, range, and this is what I typically see. This person is going to hear that and just have 20 more questions. So, something maybe like, let's talk about it when it's closer to the time, or we'll have to see what happens later when we go to court, or some way to acknowledge but not to get into, because I'm just going to promise you, if you give them a range, it's going to be more questions. Well, how many of your clients get the low range? How many of your clients get the high range? Do the judges ever go outside the range? Like, there was a cluster C patient in the state hospital one time too, and he was just like, his case was federal, and he's like, I want to know about all the downward departures and this and that, and he was given a range, and he just went all over the map with it. So I would just try to be like, provide that reassurance. I know you're worried, but, we're going to get through this case, and just try not to give them too much uncertainty to have to wrap their head around, because they might just unravel with that. Like, you have to give them the facts, but maybe just as specific facts as you can. Okay. Okay. I want to give you guys a little quiz and see if we've met one of our learning objectives. I'm going to give you guys 2 cases, all right? And I want you to tell me if each of these you think is a personality or serious mental illness that might impair their competence, okay? So the first case, your client states that the judge has HIV disorder and sells methamphetamine and crack cocaine from the bench. He states that he knows this because Bruce Lee told him. He says that Bruce Lee will protect him in the courtroom. During your meeting with him, he's difficult to keep on track in conversation, and he appears to be distracted, looking at things that you don't see. In the community before he was arrested, he was seen homeless on the street and picking up cans for his income. What do you guys think? Who thinks this is a personality disorder? Who would think it's a severe mental illness? Good, very good. So this gentleman, this would be an example of schizophrenia. So you saw for him, he had a delusion, he had hallucinations, and almost most important, look at their functioning before their charges. Anyone can come in and say that Bruce Lee told him to do this in court. We've seen it all at the state hospital as far as faking and the things that people will say. But if you look at that functioning before he was arrested, it all goes together with a picture of schizophrenia with this guy. So this gentleman, he would need a competency evaluation. He would be found incompetent to stand trial. I don't know of anyone that I know that would ever evaluate this guy and think he could stand trial, okay? Second case. You have a client on a drug trafficking charge. When he meets you, he has a meticulous grooming and hygiene, and he is wearing cologne. He's very well spoken and articulate, but when you make suggestions about legal strategy, particularly a plea bargain, he becomes loud, argumentative. He states that he is smarter than you, he knows the law better than you, and he will go pro se unless you take his case to trial. As long as you are sitting and listening to his ideas, he is calm and collected. What do you guys think? Who thinks this personality? Everyone? Okay. So do you guys see the kind of difference there? So probably, actually, this guy's going to be more difficult to work with because I'll tell you what's going to happen with this guy. He's going to come in the state hospital, and if anyone says they don't know if he's competent or not, he's going to come in the state hospital, and what we're going to see is he's going to have no problem communicating when he wants a meal, when he wants a haircut. He's going to have no problem trying to advocate for himself to get the state allowance of the $5 weekly. He's going to be selling cigarettes on the unit, so he's going to have no problem doing that. He's probably going to fake it when we ask him the questions. He's going to say like he doesn't know who the judge is, or he thinks the prosecutor is his friend and he would talk to him with no representation. But we're going to see that he can assist. He's just being difficult, or he's just faking, and he's going to end up back with you, and you're going to have to work with him. And like I said, I've had cluster B clients who are competent, who choose to go into court and do any variety of very maladaptive things. And it's like Chris and Henry was talking about earlier. People can make bad decisions, and there's nothing you can do but give them your best guidance and hope that they don't do that. At the end of the day, they could do that. But if you have some skills to try to talk with this gentleman without making things worse or making him escalate, then you're going to know that you've done your best and you've gotten the best outcome that you can working with him. Okay? All right. I don't know if you guys have any examples of any cases you wanted to ask about or any questions. Go ahead.
I really appreciate your presentation. It seems that
Thank you.
where I practice, personality disorders are not considered mitigated.
That's correct. I know, and I struggle with it myself because I do work in the community, and I see a lot of individuals with personality disorders, and this cluster B, the most difficult one, antisocial personality disorder and borderline personality disorder, those individuals most often have a childhood history that if I had gone through, I don't know if I'd even be alive, much less having a borderline personality disorder and still being standing. So I have a lot of empathy for that, but just the legal system really hasn't recognized them as having mitigating.
What do you suggest when we have someone with antisocial or one of the other cluster Bs? How do we make them more sympathetic to a judge who said,
It's really hard. It's really hard. Within the legal system, it's often negative. So myself, my own personal style, I do evaluations also. I do them for North Coast, for the state hospital. So if I was just evaluating someone for competence, which is a lot of times what I do, and I saw that they had an antisocial personality disorder, but it was irrelevant to their competency evaluation, I'm not going to write it in the report because it's not going to help your client. Plus, the judge already knows they break the law and they have legal issues and they're more or less have that behavior. So it's just it's all a luck of the draw of what is brought to the court. I would say one thing that can help is if you can use your rapport and your communication with the client so that they have the best chance of remaining calm and not doing anything too disruptive, that can help them be more sympathetic. But often, I agree with you, the court doesn't see these as mitigating. They see it as behavior. They see it as them trying to get out of punishment or disrupt the court just for fun. So I understand. It is to an extent. It is to an extent, I think. Yeah.
So you wouldn't normally then put that in the report. Is there anything keeping you from putting it in? Because
I would.
The reason I ask.
Yeah.
The reason I ask is that maybe it would help an attorney.
Yeah.
Communicate with the client.
So if I thought it was so when I do the report, I'm not trying to help the defendant at all. I'm just trying to answer the question of the court. So I have to say super neutral, and I would only put it in the report if I felt it had bared relevance for the question I was asked. So, I recently did a competency and insanity, and the person had a clear-cut narcissistic personality disorder, worst that I've seen. This gentleman had kidnapped people, kidnapped his family members. He had, ball gags and handcuffs and, paraded around in front of them with blowtorches, like he was going to cut their fingers off and all this stuff. And he talked about it like he was under indicted, is what he said. Like, I'm under indicted, this is like no big deal, my family members, are just, blowing this out of proportion. It was like and he had everything, very aloof, grandiose. But he just kept saying that he felt he was entitled to an NGRI and he really didn't have other mental illness. So in that case, it went in the report because it was the only diagnosis. It was relevant to the question asked. But when I was at the state hospital full time, I saw a ton of antisocial personality disorder. And sometimes the guys would come in and maybe they'd malinger a little bit, but then when you sat down with them and said, listen, this is a competency evaluation. I think you're competent. It's either going to be, I'm going to have to tell the judge I think you're faking, or you can just give me the answers and you can be competent. Often they would cooperate, and if they then cooperate, I would not label them antisocial. They would just be whatever their other diagnoses were, and they would be competent. That would just be that I would feel it was not relevant to the question of competence at that point that they were antisocial. I hope that makes sense. Everyone's different. It's not everyone's style. It's just how I was trained. I only really address what's relevant to the question at hand. But I get you. It might help you understand your client, but when I'm asked to do the evaluation, it's just not my job to help the client either way or the other.
So then we're left, with most of us are empathetically trained, so
right.
So obviously this is going to help us to try to identify.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say if you see any of those types of communication yourself, you can kind of start to question. The other thing is, I'm going to give you guys a key phrase. If you see in your report, this is just a huge red flag for a personality disorder. If your report comes back, and they'll comment on the knowledge arm, he knows who the judge is and the attorney and all this. And then that assist arm, if somebody says he or she can assist if he chooses to do so, that is your code word that the person has a personality disorder, okay? So that's a little tip, I guess, that should tip you off. That would often happen, like if the person's acting up in court and they're acting up on the unit, but other times they're in control, and we really believe they can control it if they want to. I mean, we had people in the state hospital tell us, like, if you send me to court, I'm just going to flip out in court. Well, that's volitional, and we're going to send you anyways. And often what you'll see in your report is, that the person made the statement, and you'll see the statement. They can assist if they should choose to do so. That would be your red flag. But I would try to pick up on the clusters too, because they're pretty dramatic and they're all a little different. And You can kind of pick up on sort of the flavor of each of the different clusters. Any other questions? Yeah. It depends. So there's one very well-researched, well-known therapy for borderline personality disorder that works also with other personality disorders that have those features of borderline, which is called DBT. The thing is, it's very intensive and it's hard to get people to do it. So there is a evidence-based technique that works well to alleviate some of the symptoms of a borderline personality disorder. Other ways, therapy can help. The trick is, individuals with personality disorders, by definition, they don't interact with people in normal ways, and the interaction sometimes is what's problematic. So the difficult part is, can you establish a therapeutic relationship, and can you get anywhere with it in any kind of therapeutic way? So it's tricky. It can help, but it's a tricky thing. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, guys.
Okay, we have a few minutes left and a couple of things we want to do. I think I have to stay over here for this to work. Where's Julie? If you can bring up the slides that we didn't, the 2 slides we didn't get to hit this morning. I want Julie to be able to show you the Ohio Moss Stepping Up website, because that may have some helpful tools and resources for you. It's also the website where all the materials from today's training will appear in the very near future. And once we get the recording, the video converted from today, our hope is that the video will also go on this website. So we want you to know where this is at and what's available to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Julie Spohn with the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, as Ruth said. So you can get to the Stepping Up webpage by going to mha.ohio.gov/steppingup. It should come up here in a minute. And the web page really has all of the counties that are involved in Stepping Up. I continuously add to it as a county signs on to Stepping Up. I'll add them. I constantly am looking for and adding resources to it. If you click on participating counties on the site, you can see all of the counties that are currently participating. And then you can also click on the map, or you can click on the tabs down here, which are in alphabetical order by county. And you basically click on their county and see there's a contact person for each county for Stepping Up. And then there's also, sometimes there's news articles that I put in there. Sometimes the county will send me stuff or resources. I think Delaware County has a lot more. I'll put, if they've been mapped, I'll put their mapping report on there. Just any information that I receive from the county, so you can look up your county and see what information, if you need a contact for your county for Stepping Up, they're on there as well. And then also the site just has other resources related to Stepping Up. Actually, for this event, you can go on the events and opportunities and events, and you can get all of the presentations from today if you wanted the online version. Currently, it's in the upcoming opportunities section, but next week I'll go ahead and put it in the materials from past events, and you'll be able to click on the event and look at the presentations. On here, there's also just like other resources. I kind of separated out by category, some like diversion and prevention, evidence-based practice and treatment. Those are some examples of other, just resources that I find and come across. So feel free to check out the website and kind of explore further if you would like to learn more about Stepping Up or look at what your county is doing.
Thank you. Okay. Lastly, we wanted to mention that primarily technical assistance is available to those working directly like in the justice system, the jails, the courts, police officers, mental health systems, where we do technical assistance to help with the interface between the two systems. But I think that you'll find resources not only on the Ohio MOS website, but at times on our website, at the CCOE, that you might find helpful as tools, and maybe even for family members of clients that you have. So we have email distribution lists on the sign-in and sign-out sheet outside. You're able to sign up for one of those lists. We have an email distribution for sequential intercept mapping, but you don't have to be from a county to get those emails, because what we do is send out kind of current state-of-the-art information that's coming down the pipeline that you might find helpful in working with these clients. We have a lending library of books and videos. If you ever want to borrow, you certainly may. You just contact Haley to do that. So a number of things. And peer networking. We occasionally will get calls from attorneys saying, I feel like I'm out here all by myself. Do you know anybody else doing this work in another county? And we have linked attorney to attorney just for peer consultation on cases, because sometimes people do feel like they're really by themselves. So just wanted to make you aware that you too can ask for this assistance. Before we end, we have a few of our presenters still here, so I think it's worth, whether it's another round of applause or a strong thank you. It's not often that we get, 3 psychiatrists in the room in one day to do trainings for us, and that means a lot to us. It means that they really value the work that you're doing and the meaningfulness of it, and evidenced by the number of people in the room, we know that this was an important issue. We're doing the same training again on Friday in Columbus. I know some of your peers who signed up today weren't able to make it because some people ended up in court or what have you. If you run into any of those folks, let them know if they're able to go Friday, they can just show up. That's fine with us because they were already registered. We will certainly honor that. But we have a group about this size or maybe a tiny bit bigger that we'll see in Columbus on Friday. So a total of about 180 attorneys from your counties signed up for this workshop, which speaks volumes to us about what's going on in the justice field. So thank you to our presenters. Dr. Testa is still here. Thank you so much. If you haven't already done so, please sign that photograph permission form. You can just leave it on the table. Please fill out the evaluation for the workshop. That will help us. We can make modest adjustments between now and Friday if we need to do that. We'll communicate with the presenters. We want this to be what you need it to be and what your peers need it to be. We have one question over here.
Yeah, typically for continuing legal education, we have an activity number and number of hours that we sign and send in so that we can go
So the continuing legal education units have been applied for. My understanding is that they will come directly to you from the Supreme Court upon approval. They have your email addresses, and so they bypass the middleman. It'll come right to you. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order that anyone needs from us? If not, if you just fill out the evaluation and the photograph form, leave them on the tables, we'll pick them up. Everybody have a great evening.